My name's Christina McKean. I'm going to be chairing in lieu of Deb Gibbarder. I think she can take the baton back again when she arrives. So welcome to the early years session. As you know, probably if you've been to other sessions, what we're doing is we're all presenting for 14 minutes each, and then at the end we're taking questions as a group. So if you could put any questions into the Q&A section of the comments, that would be really, really helpful so that we can pull them all together at the end of the session. Okay, so without further ado, I will hand over to Judy Clegg, Alex Hall, Heather Smith and Henrietta McLachlan, who are going to talk to us about an intervention based around information carrying words. So I'll hand over to you if you would like to start to share.
Okay. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to this session about evaluating ELTPLAN's early years based information carrying word pack, or IBIC. I wrote IBIC in 2009 because over the years I'd worked with a number of different groups of children and found the ICW approach really effective. But I wanted some clear written guidance of examples of directions and some bright, colourful pictures for early years practitioners who don't always have the time or access to the objects and toys that might be needed for the particular session. And I also wanted to focus on useful, everyday, early vocabulary. Could we have the next slide, please? Since 2017, I've been trying to find some funding for this piece of research because although the evidence suggests that many of us use information carrying words, the evidence for its effectiveness is pretty non-existent. But after several attempts, we managed to get some funding from the Communication Consortium's grant programme. So the next slide. So what is the IBIC programme? Well, it's based on the Derbyshire language scheme, but it's been rewritten specifically for the younger child, and it's a functional approach. The activities are all child-centred and we try to make them fun. Next slide. And what's involved? It's a target intervention for 3 to 5 year olds. And yes, initially it supports their listening and their attention and their understanding of directions. But as soon as the child understands the activity, we start to take turns. They become the teacher and they tell me what to do. And I've worked in groups of up to 3 children who have a similar level of, they're functioning at a similar level, and they take turns to tell each other. So very quickly, we're working on their expressive language, reinforcing the vocabulary and starting to do turn taking, some repair strategies and working on their social skills. So really, the information carrying word work can be used to reinforce the whole communication chain. And it also provides a structured framework to look at a variety of topics and vocabulary. Next slide. So why evaluate IBIC? Well, we need to evaluate IBIC because apparently so many of us use it. And as I've just said, the evidence is very poor. But also, I really wanted to look at the evidence for teaching assistants implementing and early years practitioners implementing. I've worked one-on-one with many early years practitioners, but could we upscale this? And if we were to train them to implement the IBIC, how much training would they need? So we asked those questions through the research project. And next slide, please. As speech and language therapists, I think we all know what information carrying words are, but I'm afraid I have a passion for information carrying words being functional and fun and relevant to the children. I've seen too many examples of things like put the rubber in the bowl and put the pencil under the plate, which is just so boring and really irrelevant to the children's lives. So fingers crossed that we're going to be able to show you this video of some of the children who are involved in the project.
Can you go buy a banana? Well done. Can you put it back for me? Tommy's turn.
He's going to buy some lettuce. Lettuce.
Well done. Amos?
If I can have cheese.
Right, Tommy's turn.
Please, can you go and put the tomato in the bag? That's not a tomato. That's a tomato.
When Amos started the Information Carrying Words programme, his listening skills were very limited to a few minutes. He used to have reminders to stay focused. He'd flip from activity to activity in the classroom. However, as the programme went on, this quickly improved, and now he's able to focus on activities that interest him for about 15 minutes. At the start of the programme, Amos could understand one information carrying word, and now is able to do 3 and give them instructions to his peers. Amos has become much more confident when speaking and joins in group time, sharing his ideas and playing cooperatively with other children. He's much more focused and enjoys nursery fully. Mum has seen a positive impact on Amos's speech and language. She's found that he has better understanding skills and is more confident when speaking.
Thank you. Many thanks, Henrietta. So I'm just going to go back in and get those slides up again. So over to me. So I was involved in evaluating the programme. As you say, we were funded by the Communications Consortium. So I'm just doing 2 things at the same time, which is always challenging. So a question we're asking from the evaluation is the IBIC programme effective in facilitating the language development of preschool children with low language scores? So we did this using a randomised control trial, and we called it a pragmatic randomised control trial because we were doing this in real life settings, which are busy and bring with it many challenges for RCT designs. But essentially with the RCT, we're comparing children who do the IBIC programme with children who don't do the IBIC programme. So on this slide, we've got some numbers in red and some numbers in blue, and the numbers in blue show the children recruited, the practitioners and the settings that stayed through all of the studies, so all of the time points. So we did over-recruit on purpose because there's always going to be some attrition you get with these studies. So we recruited 196 children from 38 mainstream early years setting, children between the ages of 3 and 3 years 11, and 47 practitioners who were trained on the IBIC. The settings identified the children with the low language scores using the language screen, which has come from Maggie Snowling's team at the University of Oxford. So once the children were identified, they were randomised into an intervention group, so they received the IBIC programme, and then a control group who didn't receive the programme at the time. We then did 2 more language measures, so the Up and Teletalk test, the criterion referenced assessment that assesses children's understanding of 2, 3, 4 information carrying words, and then the RAM for Action picture test with the information and grammar components. So we kicked off this time last year. We were delayed due to COVID. So this time last year, we were very busy, researchers going out and assessing those children on those 2 language measures. At the start of this year, the practitioners were trained and they delivered that intervention. And we've talked a lot about dosage at the conference. So there's a high level of dosage going on here. So 52 sessions over 13 weeks. After that, went back out and repeated those 2 language measures. So a really interesting question is to think about who these children are. So a real key strength of the IBIC programme is it's an inclusive programme. So you'll see our children here, all the children, and then split up into the groups. We've had quite a heterogeneous group of children. So we had children who were bi or multilingual, and we also had children who were starting to be identified with additional needs as well. So this is the language data of all the children, and the intervention children and the control group children at the start of the study. And what the data shows is that all the children did have low language scores as identified by that screen. And then on the other two measures, there was some triangulation between those. So all the children had low language scores, with the majority falling into the moderate to severe kind of severity categories as determined by those assessments. So here we have the results from the RAP, so the information and the grammar scores before the intervention and after with both groups. And what's really good to focus on is really the change scores in the last two columns. So what you can see there is both groups make changes, positive changes from before and after. And then on that information carrying word test, you get a similar profile here as well. So again, both groups, intervention and control groups, have got positive shifts from their before to after scores. So what do these results mean? So some key findings. So all the children made gains on those two language measures, and you would absolutely expect that because there would be typical maturation going on. What we were interested in is whether that intervention group makes more change than the control children, and the data shows that they do. If you then run that through some statistical tests, so ANOVA, you start to get a statistical trend for those intervention children there. So that's some evidence that the IBIC programme is effective. So I'm now going to hand over to Heather, who's just going to talk through some of the qualitative data we collected about what it's like to be a child, a parent, practitioner, carer, in terms of their experiences of the programme. So over to Heather.
Thanks, Judy. Okay, so as Judy mentioned earlier, we also asked the practitioners who were involved in delivering the intervention sessions, the parents and the children, what they thought of the programme and their experiences. And all three groups had really positive perceptions about the programme. And there were certainly some common themes that came through from those different groups. So from the practitioners, they all noted an increase in the children's vocabulary and an increase in sentence length, and that the children were generally more confident communicators, both within the intervention sessions and within their day-to-day conversations. Now, we should obviously note that these were the practitioners who delivered the intervention, so there could be an element of bias there. Next slide, please. Okay, and then in terms of parents and carers, again, very positive changes noticed around the children's confidence. They noticed that their children were using more descriptive vocabulary and asking a lot more questions. And then last but by no means least, we also asked the children their perceptions of the group, and they all enjoyed the sessions, and particularly the teddy bear. He seemed to win the win the day, and everybody enjoyed the activities involving teddy bear. And they enjoyed all of the games, and some were also able to use their metalinguistic skills to report about how their language and vocabulary had changed. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Alex now just to summarise for us. Alex, can you unmute?
We're really pleased, even at this early stage, to be able to conclude that the IBIC, an intervention for young children based on the information carrying words approach, is effective in developing both children's understanding and their expression. And furthermore, this project has demonstrated that the early years practitioners can effectively deliver such interventions, not just the speech and language therapist directly. So this used early years practitioners within the settings, working with the children every day, who had a 2-hour training from Heather. And if we move on to the next slide, would just like to credit all the previous work which has been valuable in both planning and implementing this study.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Thank you for that interesting question. We are going to move on, and I'm going to introduce myself now. So, as like Judy said, I will now try to do two things at once, which I'm not very good at, and get my screen to share. So please forgive me while I faff about a bit and get ready. And hopefully you will see my slides. And yeah. Brilliant. Okay. So this is another randomized controlled trial. This time I am comparing building early sentences therapy with an adapted Derbyshire language scheme. So we were delighted to receive funding from the Heather van der Lely Foundation for the Lively study, language intervention in the early years. And this was a cluster randomised controlled trials with settings randomised to receive either BEST, building early sentences therapy, an adapted version of the DLS, or continuing classroom support. So this is business as usual or treatment as usual, whatever schools were typically offering the child. We began recruitment and data collection in January 2020, but the COVID pandemic meant that we had to pause the study. We recommenced in January 2021, and due to my absolutely amazing team and some work with public health in the North East, we came up with a way to work safely in schools. However, we were concerned that it was unethical at that time to have a continuing classroom support arm, given what schools and children were going through at the time. So we didn't want to assess children without offering any additional support at that time. And so we changed to comparing just BEST and adapted DLS only. This made it much harder to find an effect, but if we did find an effect between two active interventions, then this is a really strong test of whether or not an intervention works. So we aim to answer the following questions. Are BEST and an adapted version of DLS associated with improvements in receptive and/or expressive language and also communicative participation? We wanted to see whether one intervention was more effective than the other. And we also wanted to know whether interventions differed in the degree to which benefits transferred to non-targeted language structures. So in many interventions, children just get better on the sentences that you teach them, but obviously what we're really looking for is whether or not it generalises to wider language learning. So we wanted to check that, and also whether or not it affected children's actual functional communication in the classroom, their communicative participation. And then we also wanted to look at whether the interventions differed in the degree to which language abilities to continue to improve after the intervention is complete. And we have some theoretical reasons for thinking that was important, which I'll explain in a moment. So why should we compare interventions? So I think it's really important that we start to compare interventions against one another, partly so that it enables choices, informed choices to be made by parents, by schools, regarding which intervention might work best for a given child, a given outcome, context, or even family preference. We also, if we are going to compare interventions delivered with the same dosage, delivery, context, and treatment fidelity, this allows us to really test whether it's the specific learning mechanisms or active ingredients that we're exploiting in the intervention which are promoting change, or whether it's just therapy general effects. Is it just having, is it just a group with some nice people and nice playing with toys that's having the effects, or is it the active ingredients that we hypothesize are at play? So just to give you, to introduce briefly the two interventions that we're comparing, building early sentences therapy, or BEST, is an intervention for young children with low language abilities over the age of around 3.5. It aims to develop children's ability to use a range of simple 2, 3, and 4 element sentences, and to be able to use those sentences flexibly and creatively with a range of verbs and a range of nouns, and to do it with appropriate grammatical morphology. Best is usually delivered in small groups, although it can be delivered in a one-to-one, but small groups are better, we find. And its dosage is 15 minutes twice a week for 8 weeks. And we give homework booklets after each intervention session for parents to give input to children at home. So BEST is based on usage-based or constructivist linguistic theories of language development. These theories suggest that children's language moves from overdevelopment from fixed, rote-learned, item-specific constructions towards more flexible and abstract representations. And it also hypothesizes that once abstract representations of argument structures and syntactic categories are formed, then this can accelerate children's language learning. So the drivers of this change from this theoretical perspective is the nature of the input that the child hears, in terms not just of the amount that the child hears, but also its content and how the structures that it hears are distributed through that input. The other driver is the child's cognitive tools, which children bring to bear on the process of language learning. And we hypothesise that by systematically manipulating the nature and quantity of the language a child hears, BEST can promote the development of abstract representations, and so can then accelerate language learning. The input manipulations used in BEST includes these different types of manipulations. So it includes systematically varying nouns within the slots in a sentence frame, aligning verbs in the input with the same predicate argument structure, so children can abstract across those two sentences that there's the same predicate argument structure. And we use signing of both the content and the morphology to support children to bootstrap their abstraction of these grammatical forms by spotting the fact that we've got the same morphology across sentences. We've got evidence already that BEST is effective in improving production standard scores when compared to treatment as usual, with a large effect size, that's D of 1.08, compared to just a usual treatment in an intervention. Using the Education Endowment Foundation guidance on interpreting effect sizes, that's a gain of 12 months progress. And we also know from this paper, this publication here that's coming out, that signing is an active ingredient within this intervention. We tested whether signing was needed or not, and it helped significantly. So yes, now moving on to the DLS, which you've already helped me to explain a little bit about. So as we know, the DLS is one of the most widely used intervention approaches in the UK. The syllabus is based on typical language development and the developmental progression described in the work of people like Bloom, Brown and Goldberg. It uses structured play-based activities designed to be meaningful to nursery children, who are encouraged to use their language to direct other children or the teacher. And as we saw, children move through stages, increasing their understanding and use of sentences with 1, 2, 3 and 4 information carrying words. The scheme includes materials to assess the children and is a flexible source of activities to enable an individualised progression through the programme based on a child's progress and language level. And we also have evidence in this paper by Broomfield and Dodd in 2011 that the Derbyshire Language Scheme is effective in improving children's comprehension when compared to a waiting list control. The way this paper was reported suggests it's hard to extract an effect size, but we get a Z-score change of 0.6 in children, which I think is similar to an effect size, a medium-sized effect size there. So we know that when you compare, this was in comparison to a waiting list control. So again, when we know that when you compare DLS to no active intervention, we get a significant change. In our study, we used an adaptive version of the DLS. So this was a version of DLS which can be delivered with high treatment fidelity and reliability within this research context. So we needed to make sure we could deliver it the same way to all children. We matched it to best as closely as possible in terms of dosage and delivery, whilst retaining the key principles of information carrying words, play-based activities, turn-taking, use of prompts, etc. And we delivered it in groups with children at the appropriate word level. And we provided homework packs and guidance videos for parents. All of these resources are available at our web pages if you wanted a closer look. We worked with Mark Mazadlover, who you know developed the DLS with Wendy Knowles, and Mark Mazadlover has described the key differences between the adapted DLS and DLS on our website if you want a bit more detail. But in broad terms, it moves more rapidly through the range of DLS target sentences than traditional DLS, and is slightly less individualised in terms of progression and modification of resources. Okay, so now to our methods. So this was a cluster randomised controlled trial, as I said. The settings were randomised by the independent statisticians. So nurseries were put in the different treatment arms by the statistician independent of the research team. Children were eligible if they were between these ages here, 305 to 405 when they started, monolingual speakers of English, no sensory neural hearing impairment, visual impairment or diagnosed learning disability. They needed to have the concentration and turn-taking abilities to be able to participate in a small group, and they needed to score at or below the 16th centile for production and or comprehension on the new RAINL. The interventions were manualised with standard therapy resources, and we checked the fidelity of delivery as well to make sure they were being delivered as intended. And as we said, there was small group delivery with 16 15-minute sessions twice a week for 8 weeks, so quite a low dosage, I think. All assessments were completed blinded to the intervention arm, and we assessed the children before the intervention, directly after the intervention, and at follow-up. And we measured using the standardised measure of receptive and expressive language. So we used the new RAINL. So this was to look at generalisation of the language skills. We assessed children on knowledge of the language structures that are actually targeted in the interventions. So we've got a picture description assessment of the best sentences, and we used an extended rapid screening test to look at the DLS structures. And we also tested communicative participation by asking teachers and parents to report on the children's communicative functioning using the focus in children under 6 assessment. So a total of 20 schools were randomised to receive either best or adapted DLS, 10 in each arm, and a total of 102 children received the interventions. 44 in the best arm and 58 in the adapted DLS. Both interventions were associated with significant improvements in receptive and expressive language and communicative participation on all outcomes. So between baseline and outcome, all children made significant progress. When comparing the interventions, we analysed the results adjusting for baseline differences. So we used statistics to make sure that we adjusted for any differences between the groups at the beginning. So first, looking at the new RAINL outcomes, we found that BEST was more effective in promoting comprehension development after the intervention with a large effect size, and the same for production with a medium effect size, and from baseline to follow-up with a large effect size. So these are, in the EEF guidance, progress of between 5 and 7 months progress, more in BEST than in DLS, in the adapted DLS, sorry. And then when we look at the BEST and DLS assessments, we're looking at the targeted language structures in the interventions. We find that we have very high, more progress in the BEST treatment arm overall between baseline and outcome, and again we've got and a moderate one between baseline and follow-up. So that's looking at a 9-month additional progress in comparison to the adapted DLS. When we look at communicative participation, we find no significant differences between the interventions. The Focus 34 doesn't generate norms, but it enables evaluation of change over time and the identification of something the authors call a minimally clinically important difference. This is something that where parents and SLTs believe that a child's made a change that's going to affect their functional communication. And they say that that's a difference in score of 16. And what we found that it was 66% overall made a minimally clinically important difference in their communicative outcomes. 73% of the children in the BEST arm and 61% in the ADLS arm. So just to conclude, my last slide then, we found that there's clinically meaningful improvements in communicative participation can be achieved from both interventions with a relatively low dosage. Caution is required here because we don't have a no treatment arm and because obviously it was in COVID conditions, but we think that's good news. Creating change in non-targeted structures is obviously vital for effective and efficient intervention, so the generalisation is really important. And we found that BEST promotes greater generalisation beyond targeted structures than ADLS, with greater gains for both comprehension and expression, NERDL standard scores with medium to large effect sizes. And BEST is associated with faster progress after the end of therapy for both comprehension and production standard scores. So this supports our hypothesis that BEST promotes the creation of abstract representations, which then can accelerate future learning. So we're really excited by those findings. Thank you. Okay, I will just share myself again and stop screen sharing. I hope I managed to stick to time. And invite Yvonne, please, to finish off this session and speak to us about identification of children who require support.
Okay, I don't think anyone can hear.
We had you for a moment, Yvonne, and then we lost you again. Do you want to try again?
Hi, Christina, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yeah, we can't see you, but we can hear you. Hopefully, if you share slides, we'll cope with your wonderful voice, Yvonne. I'm sure you can keep us captivated.
Right.
Are you able
I keep unmuting myself, and then it's being muted remotely by somebody else. So I'm not sure what's going on. Anyway, I'm going to try and share the screens. If not, I'm just going to talk. Let's give it one more go.
Yvonne?
One more try. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you see my slides?
Not yet, but they may be on their way.
I'm going to just... okay, well, I'm going to get talking. Christina, shout if you can see my slides, because I can see them. I'm just going to talk.
Sorry.
Okay, so can you hear me okay, then?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
you can hear me. All right. Okay, I'm just going to go for it. Hello, and it's really good to be with you, lots of you here today, and we've all coped admirably with lots of tech issues, and we're just going to crack on, so that's good. I'm presenting today as work that's carried out with a team, which included Sam Harding, Sharon Baker and Bronwyn Lewis from Bristol Speech and Language Therapy Research Unit and Cardiff Met University. And the title, seeing as you can't see it, is Early Identification of Speech, Language and Communication Needs, What the Evidence Says About the What, Where, Who and How. So we are all possibly on the same page of thinking that early identification is vital. Lots of work that's been carried out, including by Christina and many other colleagues, and work that's been reported in things like the Burko report, has highlighted the importance of early identification of speech, language and communication needs. And the reason for that is that if we can identify children early, we can provide intervention. We can hopefully reduce the number of children starting school who aren't ready because of their language skills. And we can also stop some problems that, if they aren't dealt with, become intractable and hard to treat when children are older. So there's lots of reasons why we want to identify children when they're young. The challenge is knowing what to do and when and how. And that's where this work is hopefully going to inform that. So what we did was we carried out a review of the evidence in the literature to look at what tools were available and also what would be recommended in the development of an early identification programme. And the reason we did this was because Welsh Government wanted this information to inform their process of monitoring children's early speech, language and communication development in Wales. And what you will probably appreciate is that Wales is quite a unique environment in that almost every child is growing up in an environment where they're exposed to more than one language, but it's hugely variable, with some children having a lot of exposure and some children having very limited exposure. So that's the context in which we were looking at this. So it's going to be of interest to you if you're interested in early identification, but also if you have an interest in working with bilingual, multilingual families, which is probably nearly everybody these days. Okay, moving on. So what we did, and if you could see these slides, you'd see that they were in Welsh and English. But as you can't, I'll just read them to you. So in English, because my Welsh is not so good. We carried out 3 scoping reviews to answer the question, what early language screen is suitable for children in Wales from birth to 5 years? One scoping review looked at the literature relating to children growing up exposed to English. One looked at the literature relating to children growing up exposed to Welsh. And another scope, the third scoping review, looked at children growing up exposed to more than one language. The inclusion criteria was that it needed to be for preschool children. The sample size for papers reporting studies in the literature needed to be greater than 20 because we needed to make sure that the results could be generalizable. The study design needed to be a description or a validation of a test designed for identification of speech. And the test needed to be designed to be used in either a primary care health setting or an early childhood setting. So basically to be used by non-specialists. We weren't talking about tools to be used by speech and language therapists, but by others in the children's workforce. So the initial literature search came up with many titles. Once we'd done a review of the titles and abstracts, we ended up with 107 papers, and then we applied the inclusion criteria, and that took us down to 43. We lost some because they were diagnostic tests for SLTs or the wrong age range, or they were intervention tools, a whole range of reasons, which is available on the slides, but also in the report, which I'll tell you about at the end. So that left us with 43 tools. Now, we then looked at the reliability and validity of these tools, and we used information in the literature to say what level we were looking for. And so we were looking for reliability of between 0.6 and 0.7 and validity of 0.8. And the scales for these are from 0 to 1, with 1 being that a tool is 100% reliable and 100% valid. So we were looking for something quite robust here. And when we did that, the 43 tools were whittled down to just 10. At this point, I would show you pictures of each of those tools, but I'm just going to read them out to you. So we had the Ages and Stages questionnaire, the Brilliance Early Childhood Screen, the ELIM or Early Language Identification Measure, Infant Language Link, the Nuffield Early Language Intervention Screen, the LENA Developmental Snapshot, the MacArthur-Bates CDI, Community Development Inventory, the Schedule of Growing Skills 2, the UK Bilingual Toddlers Assessment Tool, and the Welcome. Now, what we did then was we looked at the sensitivity and specificity of each of these tools. So that's the ability of the tool to accurately, or as far as we can, accurately identify children who have needs from, and also children who don't have needs. That's a really important measure of any kind of surveillance tool. And again, the scale of 0 to 1, we were looking for figures of 0.8. And when we applied that, we lost a number of the tools. And the only ones that were left then were the Nuffield Early Language Intervention Screen, the MacArthur-Bates CDI, the UK Bilingual Toddlers Assessment Tool, and the LENA Developmental Snapshot. Now, I should point out that when we did this, this was in an earlier stage of the development of the ELIM tool, the Early Language Identification Measure, which has been developed with funding from Public Health England, and that has been in a process of development. So if you could see my slide, you'd see there was a dotted line around that one, because that information and it will reach the criteria, the threshold for that. It's just that we didn't have the data available at that time. So that left us with 4 tools, which is great, but there were problems with all of them. So the Nuffield Early Language Intervention is only suitable for children aged 3.5 upwards. It's not in Welsh, and also there is a cost implication to it. The LENA Developmental Snapshot was similar in that it wasn't in Welsh, and it's got a cost implication, but that one only works up to age 3. The MacArthur-Bates CDI, that one is only up to age 2, but it is available in Welsh and it is free. And similarly, the UK Bilingual Assessment Tool is available in Welsh and is free, but is only available up to age 2. And it also doesn't assess all the language areas that we would be interested to assess. So there's a problem there. So in short, there's no one tool to recommend. All of them have merit, but none of them fulfilled all of the requirements. So I'm going to credit Welsh Government here, and Catherine Pape, who is one of the SLTs seconded to Welsh Government that Derek Mumm referred to earlier in the keynote from RCSLT. Welsh Government have funded the development of a new tool to address this issue of the need of something that fits the Welsh context. But what we could do from this review was come up with recommendations, and I'm going to briefly talk you through those now. So one recommendation was that it should be a systematic or preventative approach to screening rather than a single screen. So what I mean there is that we shouldn't be looking for a one-off screen at one point in time to say, this child is fine. What we should be instituting is a program of surveillance, a program of monitoring over time. We know from work that's been carried out with the ELF study in Melbourne in Australia that some children might present as okay at age 2, but actually have quite significant needs at age 4, and vice versa. So it's important that we see children over time. Another useful recommendation was that key developmental communication milestones can be used in this process. So that's really helpful for us. Another recommendation was that known risk factors could be combined with monitoring of language skills and dynamic assessment. Now, I should just mention a word of caution there. When we're talking about risk factors, there are some things which parents can't do anything about. And I think the work that ELIM have completed already, and we're very much building on that, they've found that parents feel quite uncomfortable with some questions if we're asking about risk factors that there really isn't anything they can do about. So we need to be mindful of that. There are other risk factors that I think parents would probably be okay about. So work that we've done looking at predictors for persistent speech disorder has found that children who aren't combining words at age 2, for example, are more likely to have persistent speech problems. So things like that perhaps we can ask, but we need to just treat that with caution. We did find out that parents can provide reliable information about communication development from age 2 years, and I think that's probably something that many of you would feel comfortable with, and it's good to have that confirmed, so we can rely on parent report from age 2 onwards. A few comments and recommendations here relating to the robustness of the tool. The recommendation was that we should only be using tools where there's data available to make a judgment about their robustness. I think this is really important. If you remember, we had 43 tools that fulfilled the criteria until we put that utility equation in place. And in fact, when the full utility equation was applied, we only ended up with 4. So we should be looking at tools based on their validity, reliability, their impact, their acceptability to both the children's workforce and parents, and children for that matter, their cost and their diagnostic power. But I think some of you might be saying, but we've got tools and perhaps, you know, there's not data available for these yet. So we need to make a plan to acquire the evidence for tools that show promise. So, you know, all is not lost, but we really should be making sure that we're using tools that have those, have that robustness to them. A few comments about bilingualism. So it's really important that we collect information on children's language background and the exposure they have to each of the languages that they are exposed to. And we should assess them in all of their languages. And I use that word very carefully, should, because I know that that's not possible for some of the languages that the children that we work with are exposed to. So I think that's something that's aspirational. We need to find a way to make it possible for us to assess children in all of the languages that they're exposed to. But I'm just going to acknowledge the challenge that that is at the moment. And a last point about the use of standardized assessments, that we should be using standardized assessments that have been that have norms for monolingual children. We have to be very careful if we're using those with bilingual children, which again, I think you're probably already aware of that. So my final slide shows the report for this and a QR code. And what I will do, I'll put the link in the Q&A after I'm not sharing my slides. The report's got lots of information.
I didn't want to interrupt you. People are able to see them now. So.
Oh, that is good. Don't know what happened there then. Okay, so there's a QR code there.
Flow, exactly. So the QR code's there. Carry on. Sorry.
That's okay. I'm very pleased to hear that. I will still put the link in the chat. I think my time is probably over. My last point is just to mention, I mentioned that project, the funding from Welsh Government. That's started now. We have a project called Project Penguin. That is the right spelling of penguin if you're Welsh. And the reason, there's a long story for why it's called Penguin, which I'll tell people another time. But we started that work. It's very exciting. A program of surveillance from age 0 to 5 for children growing up in Wales who are exposed to both English and Welsh and other languages beside. And I'm going to finish there. Stop sharing if I get to that. Now it says you should share your screen. That's a bit late. Right. That's it. I think I've stopped sharing. Phew. I can't hear you there, Christina.
So I told you I can only multitask so far. Thank you very much indeed for a great presentation. That was one too many hats to wear, unmuting, and yeah, anyway. So can I invite all of the speakers to unmute and put their cameras on for the last 10 minutes, and we'll have a look at some of the questions that have been coming through. I know people have been responding in the Q&As as well. I'll maybe start with one for you, Yvonne. An interesting question about that point about parents being uncomfortable about being asked about risk factors that they have no control over. They're interested in some, if there's any particular literature that was you could point to there, or what, to reflect a little bit more on that point.
Well, that's a very good question, and Christine, that ended up being bounced back to you, because this was work that came out of ELIM, and Christina is also, we're working together on Project Penguin, and the great thing about this is that we are able to build on the work that was carried out in ELIM. So I know that came out of conversations that we had. Is it in the reports from ELIM? Is that the best place for somebody to look?
Yeah, so if you look on the Public Health England website, and there's a shortened report, but also on the Newcastle website. As I said, I can't multitask. In a moment, I will try to find the link to the report.
I'll try and do that.
Which has beautiful work that Sue Ralston was part of the Ealing development team and did wonderful qualitative work with parents as we developed the tool, and this was something that came out of those conversations with parents, that they felt very uncomfortable with those. Fair point, really, isn't it? I think. Yeah. So yeah, that's where it came from, for some empirical data. Okay. Yeah, if you can plug out my publication, Yvonne, that'd be awesome. Thank you. I will now ask. I'll check in a minute. So, Judy, there's a question, and the team. There's lots of people very excited by the work. I think one person wanted to have a bit more information about the sort of which aspects were significant and which were not significant in the comparisons. Sorry, I'm scrolling back through. So what came through as statistically significant in the comparisons in that study, in your study?
Okay.
I'll try and find wording.
So I can't quite see the question. So in terms of significance, we're looking at the effects of time and group, but we've got a very heterogeneous group there, so we need to do quite a bit of work really to tease out some of the other things that will be going on. So severity, for example, number of languages the children speak, severity in terms of kind of response to the programme as well. So what you've got there is just a broad brush in terms of the significant findings, but there's a lot of work to do to kind of unpick some of the other things that are going on there. I'm very happy to talk to people outside of this. I'm just aware it might be a bit boring for some people, numbers and stats and things, but yeah. So one of the challenges is the heterogeneity of that group we've got there. Lots of children and lots of different things going on, so we need to have a look at that. Is that okay?
Lovely. Yeah, thank you. As I say, real world pragmatic trial. There's a question for me, which was around, so is best just for speech and language therapists and information carrying words for learning support assistants. So the building early sentences therapy, we've only evaluated it through speech and language therapists or trained research associates who are not speech and language therapists delivering the interventions. We haven't tried training, we haven't got empirical data that training other people to use it works. However, what I would say, it has been used clinically in a number of different places very successfully with learning support assistants and in nurseries. And we used a treatment fidelity tool to test the fidelity of delivery of BEST and test the fidelity of delivery of ADLS in our study, and we found that people can deliver BEST to almost 100% fidelity. It's a really easy intervention to deliver once you're trained to do it. We've got all the resources available on the website, and we're going to be putting some videos up there to help people soon. So sorry, I'll have a look if there's any that have come through for you, Yvonne, as you were last up. So Lara Meredith has asked, was that just that none of the screens could be recommended in the Welsh context, or was it that none of them would meet the criteria in the UK context? So they're interested in how you came down to your shortlist, and was it just because they didn't fit for Wales, or was this more general? So we've lost your sound, Yvonne, sorry.
There I am. Can you hear me now? It wasn't just that they weren't suitable for the Welsh context, that they didn't fulfil the criteria, which I would not say there wasn't anything specific to Wales about that, really. No, they didn't fulfil our criteria, so it's not really about whether they were compatible with the UK or the Welsh context. It was things like age that they covered, whether they were specific to speech and language, whether it was a speech and language therapy or non-speech and language therapy person, especially delivering it, whether they fulfilled the validity and reliability requirements. So there wasn't anything in there that was specific about Welsh. No.
Okay.
Hope that answers that question.
Thank you. Yes, it does. Sorry, I'm frantically scrolling through other questions. Some people are asking what's been published and what hasn't been published yet, so we can maybe all speak to that. For the best intervention, the quasi-experimental study that demonstrated that children gain 12 months progress when compared to treatment as usual, that's just been accepted and will be in IJLCD in a matter of days or weeks, so you can look at that one. And we're writing the other paper now. This was a practice of us sharing our findings, so we're looking forward to submitting that paper elsewhere. And we have other papers coming out about adapting best to other languages as well. Who shall I go to next? Gigi, would you like to go next and say what the plan, where we can find out more information about the EYICW work?
Yep, so it's on my list. We're writing at the moment, so get back on it tomorrow. But yes, we will do. So we will write a report back to the funders, and then 1 or 2 papers coming out. So we will do that.
And it's
looking at me, so it's on the list.
So this is hot off the press, is it, Judy? Yeah, thank you. And Yvonne, the report about the schools?
Yeah, so the report is out, so that is available. Catherine's shared the link and I've shared the link. And probably if you Google Welsh and Early Language Screening Review, you'll get it. So it's not too hard to find. It's a long report, but I think you can dip in and out of it relatively easier. So I think it's worth looking at, but not reading from cover to cover. Catherine had to do that. But, yeah, you dip in and out.
Great. Okay, we've got one last question that was what signing was used with best. It's Makaton for all the content words and some Paget Gorman for the grammatical morphology, and they're all available on our website if you want to have a look at what those look like with videos of how to make the signs. Okay, I think that's our time is up, folks. Thank you very much. I hope people have enjoyed it. Thank you for tackling the tech. I've realised my cognition is not quite as good as it used to be in multitasking, but anyway, that's a bit of a worry. But thank you everybody for joining us. I really loved hearing about the work. I'll see you all soon. Bye.